Can you tell I'm in my sweatpants? Hey guys, Luke Bohanicki back with a juicy one. Well, I didn't interview the co-founder of Uber, but I actually think I did one better. I interviewed someone that competed directly against them. Gary Jackson co-founded Hailo, the UK equivalent of Uber, a British technology platform that matched taxi drivers with customers through its mobile application. What started as 3 taxi drivers and 3 tech entrepreneurs forming a company called Hailo went on to run millions of rides for passengers with tens of thousands of taxi drivers. They made $100 million, raised $125 million in funding, and essentially went head-to-head against the likes of Uber that raised 10 times as much money as they had. This episode walks through how Hailo got started, Gary's methodology for where good ideas come from, the competitive advantage that Hailo found, the successful marketing, branding, and communication efforts they led, what it was like to fight against Uber, and where they went right and where they went wrong. Hailo might have lost the war against Uber, but they sure as hell won a lot of fights, changing the industry along the way. Gary shares the lessons learned, and where he feels the business of Uber is headed. Holy shit, I need a haircut. From taxi man to tech entrepreneur. Tune in if you're with me for this one. Like the video and subscribe to encourage me to keep pumping out these episodes weekly. And share it with those who might also find value. Shoot me a message in the YouTube comments. Or better yet, I'm on LinkedIn talking first customers, first products, and getting startup traction daily. So if you figure out how to spell my name, I'll see you there. Okay. Let's hit it. Ready, set. Okay, we are officially live. Gary, how are you doing today, my friend?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Luke.
Great. I'm just going to jump right into it. How do we transfer you from being a taxi driver to being a tech entrepreneur? That's not something that every one of your family members and colleagues did. When I was doing some research on you, that was probably the most interesting thing I found, is how your full family has a background in the black cab industry, hey?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. My uncles was black taxi drivers. My brother was a black taxi driver. It's probably one of the last things that I wanted to do. You don't really want to follow your siblings into actually work that they actually do. But I think after a while, you tend to realise that wait a minute, they seem to have money. They seem to have time. They could do what they like. They went out when they liked. So a London taxi driver is actually a really good living.
Yeah, you had to study for 5 years, as I understand, right? 5 years of education and work experience to get to where you eventually got to, right? It's not something that you can just jump in overnight.
No. So to do the London knowledge, you have to virtually learn every street, every place of interest, and how to get there from A to B. It's a really lot of stuff to do, and especially when you're not very educated in writing and reading, etc. And the way they've done it is you had to learn 200 and I think it was about 360. They called them runs from A to Z. So you had to learn every street, and you would learn it parrot fashion. So you'd read it, then you'd learn it again. Funny enough, when I done the knowledge, I think maybe that's where a bit of my technology stuff come from, because they started introducing tools that you could use. So when you done the knowledge, normally you used to go out on a bike. So you go out on a bike on the streets, you learn and you drive the routes that you're told to drive, and then you come back home and you learn them. So I actually started using technology quite a lot. So they used to supply maps. So I was more focused on what the map looked like and where these points was, and use that as my guideline, where a lot of people use the actual physical of seeing something as a guideline. But it took me 5 years, lots of stopping and starting and working at the same time. I used to fix photocopiers back in the day. And I think a lot of my problem solving come from fixing photocopiers. And I'll try to explain that I was the best photocopy engineer in being able to get in and get out as quickly as possible. So I would spend all my time trying to learn the best way to fix these photocopiers so that I could get in and get out and then walk the streets and just have like a jolly up with my friends. I used to meet them when I was out.
Yeah. So if we fast forward a handful of years, you were the co-founder of Hailo. You guys raised $125 million. You had well over $100 million in revenue. You guys were fighting Uber in New York City. I'm trying to understand what made you unique as a person so that you saw these opportunities, just as the new iPhone was, just as the iPhone in general was coming out, right? You started to see these opportunities. This was not your first startup either. Maybe share a bit of the mindset. Why were you able to see opportunity in a space when perhaps 99.5% of your colleagues weren't? Were you exposed to something? Were you screwed a little differently? I prefer to think I was.
Mm. I think going back to the very beginning, I don't think I was very entrepreneurial in my early days. I think the way I was brought up was I was brought up in a normal state school where you're hustling, bustling to like probably keeping away from bullies or and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you're learning problem solving then, but you don't even realise it. I always go back to, if I spoke to any of my mates at problem solving, they're the best in the world. People who are brought up in the East End of London are quite clever in that way, the common sense way. So, but going on to when my entrepreneurial started, it started probably with a few things. One was the iPhone come along, which was really, to be honest, I didn't even adapt to it the first time it came out. My friend showed me it and I went, oh, what's that? It'll never take off, sort of thing. Though I did have a contract where you used to have every phone, and every time I used to change it constantly. So I was up to date with the technology of the phones. But when it comes to the iPhone, I didn't really adapt as quick as I probably should have done. But it was more of a case of, you now had this technology. One, it was mobility connectivity. And two is I learned quite a bit from using the notes within the iPhone. So
Yeah.
now I could write and it could spell check me and I could put my ideas down. I even used to you had a lot of time when you're in a taxi driver because you're sitting on ranks waiting for work. So I'd even write songs, etc., and just put any ideas down. I think and then I classed a couple of other things. One is I read someone got in my taxi and said, you need to read NLP. And it was like, what's that? I don't even still know. I still don't know how to say it. I think it's neuro linguistic programming. Yeah. So I went out and got the dummy version of that, and that sort of changed my mindset as well. And I think at the same time, no one else really knows this. My cousin was this multi-millionaire broker, and I could have got a job with him. And I always thought to myself, if he could do it, then I definitely could do it. And if he's going to do it, I'll earn more money than him. So I was having conversations with him. So then the money started triggering in my head. So it was like, how do you then start making money? And that's when I think my entrepreneurial stuff come along. We'll probably go into it later, but at that time, I thought I made the right decision going into Hailo. And now I probably look back and go, no, I probably made the wrong decision. It would have been better getting some money and then investing that in my ideas.
Yeah, you probably credit timing to how Hailo was able to exist in the first place, right? Something shifted in the market, like you said, and you were specifically an early adopter, which is my observation, which is perhaps why you were able to jump on this opportunity. As I understand, I think you guys were about the 8th ride-sharing taxi hailing application in the London, England area. So you guys weren't the first, but you were one of, and we'll talk about the competitive advantage shortly. But it seems like there's something innate in you in general in being an early adopter, an opportunity seeker. And yeah, perhaps there was a circumstance in your personal life where you wanted to best out a family member, but you got in at the right timing. And then you had your first startup company, Taxi Light. Can you share what the business model was for Taxi Light? What was the value proposition? And how closely did that relate to what you then shifted to just a few years later after a coffee meeting with Hailo?
That's a really good one, because when people talk, we're going to when Hailo started, and it looked like it was the eighth one to start, because it actually started a lot earlier. And then go back to Taxi Light, which always gives me the. I always say, when they say Uber was before you, I always go, nah, technically they weren't, because we started something very similar-ish in the early days, and I don't think people really know what we done at Taxi Light. And I'll tell you. One is how I come up with the idea, because I'm probably more the idea person. And I remember driving home one day, and I had my phone in my hand, and I remember thinking to myself, wait a minute, we've got connectivity now. I'm driving around and I can connect to anyone I like. What would happen if I connected to a customer? Now, you could do this beforehand, but it weren't live. So you couldn't book like a taxi and then be out on the road and be able to confirm it. The driver couldn't anyway. So I remember driving home, and then I had the idea of thinking to myself, I'm driving home empty, and most taxi drivers live about 14 miles from the city centre. So we all drive home empty, and we all drive in empty. And it was a case of, there was private hire at the time, and just for a lot of your viewers might not know, private hire in London, it's similar to Uber, but it's regulated.
Okay.
Where London taxis are properly regulated, and they can be held down off the street. So there was London taxis, and the reason you do 5 years to do the knowledge is so that you can be held down off the street, like a yellow cab in New York and in Canada. So you do this, so you have the right to be able to be held down off the street. So there I was, I'm driving home empty, and there they was driving home with someone in there in the back.
Right.
And the only difference was they could charge cheaper because they never went through what I went through, and they never had my costs. So I come up with the idea and said, I'm going home empty anyway. I would go home for, say, £20 instead of £50, because to me that's £20 in my pocket, and that pays for my diesel, and I would do the same coming in. So we come up with the idea of, if we set up a website, that we could set up a website, and people could go on there and they could put in what price that they wanted to pay. And then if drivers see that journey and they live nearby, they could accept it and then match. And it was at that time, it was quite inventive. I mean, when it first started, you order a taxi and someone put a price in, and if you as a taxi driver accepted, you both got an email at the same time. And at that time, that was unheard of. Nowadays, everything is an email. But at that time, that was quite revolutionary. So we started off doing that, and I got two fellow founders in. I got one in, Terry Runham, who was my initial co-founder at Taxi Light. We was the guys who was going out at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we'd be talking about what's our next venture, how we're going to make money.
Cool.
So I said to him, I've got this idea about doing, it weren't called Taxi Light then. I've got this idea. Do you want to get on board? And he said, yeah, I love it. Great idea. And then further down the line, another friend of ours called Russell Hall was quite well known within the taxi industry. And I thought, I might think I'm quite a humble person. I'm not that great at getting myself out there and being on these sort of things and talking, etc. So I thought, let him do that job for us. And now we've got a nice little team. And we was really fortunate that we had 3 guys who, it was every day. We worked non-stop on this. We worked really hard. We went on the internet because that's all we knew what to do. And we said, we got in touch with a guy who said about he was in e-commerce and he could help us build a website that could do this. And then he brought his other partner on. So we had this nice little team. There was 5 of us. We didn't know anything about equity. So it was like, everyone's equal. We're all in this together. Right. And then we started realizing that the other 2 guys was giving us like an hour a week, or they really weren't pushing it the way we was. So we had problems, but we got the website working. We even had like, when we talk about who came first, we used to do taxi sharing. So we used to do taxi sharing, but we done it knowledge based. We knew where people come in from, and we knew they went, say, from outside of London to Canary Wharf, which is the business part of London, and the city, and etc. So we set up all these like taxi shares, and we started offering them out. And then this is when the product mind comes in with me, is how do you do that? And at the time I was playing poker online.
Cool.
And if you ever play, I don't know if you've ever played poker online, but
yeah.
you sit there and you wait for people to join the table. So I sat there and I thought, well, that's not dissimilar to a taxi. There's 4 people in a taxi. You start off with one, and as they join, then that table disappears and gets played somewhere. And we set up a system like that in taxis. So that's where my product mind comes, is I think of other things that help the solution that I'm trying to find, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's the way my brain thinks. It just thinks, there's something, how can I adapt that to make something else better?
And you're pulling from completely different experiences, right? So you're playing online poker, you understand a completely different product, but you can still look for relatability, and that's always a huge advantage. Did you see? So you created a product, you created some IP, you had a business, and then you suddenly made a shift when you met up with so you had a team of 3, and you met a team of 3 more tech entrepreneurs, and then you formed Hailo. The transition between those two, did you bring the IP that you had from Taxi Light to Hailo? Did you bring the lessons learned from Taxi Light to Hailo? Or what would you say you did in Taxi Light that set you up for a good quick start for Hailo? Because I know Hailo was known, and you were known for having a great product, better than everybody else. My thought is you probably took something from Taxi Light and you applied it to your next startup.
Okay. So the most important thing with Taxi Light is we had drivers. So we didn't have customers coming in, because it's very hard to get customers. Even if you say something's free, we found out, it becomes, unless you tell people, they don't know anything about it. So Our main thing was getting drivers. So we used to go out and we'd make our own leaflets. So we'd do our own leaflets, and if you went back to them now, they'd be quite funny to look at them. But the messaging was really good. The design weren't great, but that was because I was designing. So now you went from just being a taxi driver, and then I would be the designer of these leaflets. And then me and Russell, who was the one of our other founder, and Terry, would start writing slogans. What do these people want to hear? And what they want to hear is they want to hear their scenario. So our main thing is getting drivers on board, is telling them a scenario, because if you tell them what they're thinking, then they believe you won, and also you can lead them further down the line. So telling a taxi driver that going home empty, why would I not take £20 to go home empty? It's bums on seats. It's all them sort of slogans. It resonates with them, and then they go, I'm going to join that. And they started joining. And it used to be quite funny, because even in them days, the technology is a lot better now, but I'd sit on my iPhone and I'd be looking, and another one had joined. And it was like, oh my God, there's loads of drivers. And in the end, I think we had over 1,000 drivers. And the way we used to get these drivers was proper old school. So we would go out and we'd get leaflets, and we'd be sticking on with blue tack at the ranks. Then we'd come back round, and then some cleaner had took them back off again, and then we was using the same blue tack, sticking them back on again, etc. My thumbs was like in pieces by the end of the day. But we was virtually working at that time and really pushing drivers. Then you start getting problems as well, because you're not always doing what everyone else wants. There's always competition, and then people's other minds, they start thinking along the same line, and they want a piece of that. So we had like, there was another company called Tweet a London Cab. But this is quite funny, this story. This is how our mind works. We had a competition called Tweet a London Cab. So they used to tweet and say, if you want a taxi, then put in where you want to go to and from. So not they become enemies, but they didn't like us because we was getting loads of drivers and they didn't like our idea. So instead of going against them, actually what we done was we actually went with them. So we started doing events. So if there was events going on, we would supply them with the events so they could tell their customers, if you know what I mean, drivers, that there was the theatres was finishing. So it helped them drivers. So we started giving them events, and then we started giving them traffic alerts. So we started helping them, and then we sort of, that's where we're coming to the next part of Hailo. That's where we brought a lot of the stuff that people wouldn't have known about from Taxi Light over to Hailo.
Okay, so like drivers was the competitive advantage, right? You had a driver pool that was arguably better than anybody else's, and you were able to do this in a way that I think even Uber ended up becoming jealous of. It seems like one thing that you did really well at that intersection that you just touched on was the message. So it wasn't just that you came from the industry and you knew how to talk to cab drivers, which is huge, but you had a really good message because you understood them. It seems like you combined perhaps some traditional marketing hustle with really good messaging, because one thing I took from studying you online, Gary, is that when drivers would hear the pitch, they'd come back to you 3 months later and they would still remember the pitch, right? They would still remember that tagline, that slogan. So I think maybe that's something that really helped you guys off the start. It wasn't just putting up those marketing flyers. It was how memorable it was. It was how you were able to speak their exact language. You should be able to tell someone and they tell their friend. And if they're saying the same message that you initially relayed, that's a pretty good head start, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it goes on to, I found this out later on, Jay, one of our co-founders of Hailo, always said, Hailo has to be, it's just hassle-free. Whatever you do, it's just like, it even went like, if you're going to go get on a plane, I want it as hassle as possible. And that's the theory we took into Hailo, which was a bit further down the line. But we was already doing that anyway. Like you said, that we was telling them what their problem was. Even if they didn't know what their problem was, tell them what their problem is, and then go, oh, by the way, this website at the bottom, actually, it's your solution. So you're virtually telling them the stuff with the answer there, but you're not telling them. Because what we found later on down the line is, don't ever tell someone, especially a taxi driver, don't ever tell him what to think. Let him think for himself. So the amount of times that people said to me, an idea, a slogan, a message to me, where I thought, I told you that, but I never said anything. It was always, yeah, that's really good. And that's the way we worked from Taxi Light. And then that's where it led up to, with Taxi Light, the customers weren't coming in and we was working really hard. And then there's quite a nice little story on how we met the other guys as well, the 3 co-founders as well.
Yeah, I enjoyed that on a separate podcast, how it seems like you guys met at a coffee shop. My favorite part of that story that I heard, Gary, is how it was the 3 taxi drivers who wore the suits, and it was the 3 tech entrepreneurs that showed up, I'm assuming not quite there.
It was quite funny because, so one, to do the knowledge, which was the taxi knowledge, if you went into the knowledge, you used to do appearances. And when you go up for an appearance, so you have to go to a teacher, and that teacher will tell you, go from A to B. When you turned up for that knowledge appearance, it was called an appearance, yeah? You turned up for an appearance, you wore a suit. You had to wear a suit. Right. Now, they knew that in everyday life, you never wore a suit. But the taxi industry, you had to wear a suit. You had to be smart. You had to say please and thank you. So you would go, take me from Liverpool Street to here, and you would go, yes, sir. Leave on the left, which meant you was leaving on the left of a building, say Liverpool Street, forward into, and you would virtually say sir about 1 million times on the way there. So it was all about politeness. It was all about, you'd be amazed how good the knowledge is. What it taught you is, I had people, when they was doing an appearance, they had pens thrown at them and they would get called names, and you would think in nowadays people would go, how can you do that? That's wrong. But it was all about that they knew that you was going to be a taxi driver. And people who can get in the back of taxis are not all nice and polite. And they might swear at you. They might be rude to you. They might throw a pen at you. And how you reacted in that appearance went back to say, yes, you're a good guy. So with the appearance, it was like a 50-50 thing. If you was a nice person, it got you through. And you took that on to being a taxi driver.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. So when you guys started Hailo, again, you weren't the first company that launched. Technically, if we rewind, you were in the market, but you had a bit of a different value proposition, a little bit of a different product, a little bit of a different set of IP. When you did actually launch, what separated you from all the other taxi cab companies? As I understand, one of the main things is of the two-sided marketplace, as it would be called today, you really nailed the supply side. You made sure that you didn't just have 2 or 3 cabs available. You had plenty of drivers to be able to satisfy any kind of demand that you got. It seems like you emphasized the customer experience, the customer service. Is that true? Would you say that your launch strategy of focusing on the supply side over the demand side gave you a huge head start?
But so you probably have to go back to when we first met with the other 3 co-founders after the suits, etc.
Yeah.
People don't know this story. So we virtually quickly went from they really liked us, we really liked them, and it was like, let's get this going straight away. So we actually met up and we went into like an office, and there was those 3 guys, us 3, and we virtually went through the whole business, the taxi industry, spoke to them about it, etc. And we said to them, this is what we're doing at Taxi Light. We're trying to get them jobs in and out. We're doing the traffic. We're doing the bursts. What we need to do, because you need drivers will never use a system if there's no work going through, because they'll get bored of it very quickly.
Right.
So what we said to them is, we need to build a system that can keep drivers occupied even though there's no work in. And when you said about where we was to launch, and we was like the 8th, and there was all these other ones coming along, and I'll go into why we didn't care about them in a minute. But we was a year between development and actually launching, because we was building a tool for drivers that would tell them where the work was. It would tell them where the traffic was. We was going to have a chat facility, because we wanted, this is how I think is, I wanted a chat system, and at the time WhatsApp weren't about, but I wanted a chat system because Twitter was so nasty. And this is in the early days. I sat there and I looked at Twitter, and all people used it for was nastiness of, you can't do that, you can't do this. We wanted to keep the chat with amongst the taxi drivers, so they weren't chatting out in the open. We never got to launch it. We did launch get a friends thing where they could see each other driving around. And we also had a credit card system put in, because no one had a credit card machine, but now they had a credit card where they could use with a phone.
Right.
So we had a wonder tool for our drivers. So we built this wonder tool. So it was constantly being updated. So for a whole year, without any jobs going through, we had, first of all, we started with, I picked my driver. It's going to sound boastful, but I had quite a lot of friends. So I got all my friends. It was all taxi drivers, and we used to go meeting. And by the way, that's where most of the Taxi Light come from. Is, imagine sitting in a coffee bar with your friends and you want to get somewhere. It was all about getting someone from A to B, like a driver earning money in his downtime. If I'm going to go get a coffee, I want to earn money. So I want to know there's a job where I'm going, or if I'm sitting there, there's a job ready for me now.
Sure.
So I'm speaking to these guys, and what we done was we got really trusted friends in, and they helped us beta test the first versions. Then we went out, and at the time it was only an iPhone app, and no one had iPhones. They all had Androids. So we went about 3 months without an Android app. So we was building up these drivers and constantly battling all the way along, because then we had other people, there's other apps out there who are trying to do the same stuff. And then now that they're now putting bad messages out about you, but we knew how to handle that anyway. So it took us about a year to go round. And then on our launch date, we watched all the others launch, but they couldn't cover the work. And then when we launched, we had so many drivers that when you press that button, you got a taxi. And it don't matter what you do, what price you have, whatever you do, if you build something that when they press that button and you don't let them down, you'll be there forever. Yeah. And and this is obviously the first version of no, this is the bad version of the app, which we'll go on to afterwards, because this has got the cars in it, but this is the US version, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure which version it is, but just to communicate the general idea, we're looking at the consumer application here, but it seems like the bread and butter, like you alluded to, Gary, the magic weapon you had was actually on the driver's side, right? It wasn't on the passenger side. You built a tool that actually had some sort of driver management in it, right? You actually had a tool that made a cab driver earn more money and become more efficient and have less hassle. And it seems like that was where you focused initially. If you had to choose between the two-sided marketplace, you really made sure to offer a really compelling value proposition to the cabbies. Does that make sense?
Yes, and now you're talking about it, it's quite good that. Remember, we had a year of launching, so it was really fortunate. We had a year. It was fortunate that we had a year of launching, because what that meant was that we spoke to nearly every driver out there. So there was times in where I had like this trump card where me, Russell, and Terry, we were so mad, we put our actual mobile phone numbers on 50,000 leaflets. You know, when we give them out to drivers, the three of us, that's how we done it. So that's how crazy we was, that every driver knew us, every driver talked to us. So when you say that when we launched, we've actually had a year of selling them the story of, go out there, guys, this is your work. Go get your work back. We're going to win the work back from Addison Lee, which was the big private hire company. We're going to do this. They had that ingrained in them. So the day that they went on that app and they got their first job, it was virtually Gary speaking to the passenger or Russell speaking to the passenger, because we'd told them that story the whole way along. So when you got into the back of one of the Hailo, there was a time in Hailo where people started complaining, oh my God, this taxi driver won't shut up about how good Hailo is. Do you get what I mean? That's how it was. They sold it to every single customer. The other thing that we did do as well, in case I forget, is that we did also launch, and I think we done our first 100,000 jobs for nothing as well. So the money we did have come in did help us where we could launch, and we did zero commission for X amount of jobs, etc. So and also at that time promo codes.
Yep.
Which was really valuable, because at that time, if the driver's giving out a promo code and he's saying, look, use this, plus you'll get £5 off your next journey, it became a very powerful tool. And I was thinking about this the other day, is with marketing, what is the best marketing? Is it big billboards or branding, or is it specific commercial selling? Think of it from like I was thinking a shop's point of view. Is it better for someone to be a shop attendant and sell someone something to one person than to have a big brand that's selling it to loads? You have to do the maths, but if you've got more of that customer service, then that probably is a better customer than doing big branding.
I would totally agree. Yeah, the fact that you guys did have your personal phone numbers on all the leaflets was a huge advantage initially. I'm curious how you were able to finance that first year pre-launch. Did you guys raise some funding from private investors pre-launch? Were you bootstrapping and just finding a way to make enough money doing your traditional cab driving job up until launch? Because a lot of entrepreneurs can't afford, in their minds at least, to have that 1 year runway, right? Where you're building relationship, where you're improving the product. There's expenses there, Gary. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah. So one thing is that like when we started, we never actually officially started to about 6 months later, because obviously we had no money. I think Ron, Jay and Casper, our fellow co-founders, had initial investment that they could use. And then afterwards, remember, we was taxi drivers. And you'll probably find like most entrepreneurs, is they end up being in real big debt. And the reason they're in real big debt is because they was never working their job properly. So I was working my job and I was working really hard, but we were subsidizing it with credit cards, etc. And I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs do that. But you've always got in the back of your mind, don't worry about that, because it's going to be successful and you're going to pay that off. It never comes around. So we sort of subsidized it, and then we went on. It got to a stage where we had to go on it full time and work it full time, etc. And then I think that was after we had our first round, which was the 1.2 million, I think, which I think would have been about 6 months in to when we first started.
Okay. So you bootstrapped for the first 6 months, and then you spent the next 6 months with investment, which gave you the chance to work on product, because you guys didn't have any developers on the co-founding team, right? You had to go outside and hire developers to actually build the product.
Yeah, so it was really fortunate with 2 employees. One was Jose, who worked with Casper and Jay at eCourier. So he virtually, eCourier was like it was quite a revolutionary platform that Jay started and Casper worked at, where they dispatched couriers automatically instead of doing it via voice control, etc. So he started that. So Jose come on quite early on, and he built, I think, the main platform to it. And Martin Sweeney, who was another one of the early employees, he was one of the guys who sat around, knowing I said that initial meeting that we had, we come up with all these ideas. He was the one writing them down and saying, okay, let's get this down and put into place, etc. So we had 2 good engineers. I think even our first, I think we didn't have anything to do with that side of it, that technology side. We did have a couple of mishaps with our first 2 people that started. I think the first app that was ever introduced was absolutely terrible, and they just didn't really get it. But from then on, Jay, who was the CEO, he had this mentality of getting the best. He did give me some really good insights. I think one which goes on to how your mind can think as well is a couple of things. I think Martin Sweeney was one of the other guys who said, don't think of anything that can't be done, and don't think of anything that costs too much. That if once you've got that in your mindset, and which I had after, you can invent anything, because you can come up, if you're told constantly you can't build this can't be done, in the end you just stop thinking. But if you're told you can do whatever you like, then you can come up with some ideas, so that was quite fortunate. So on that tech side, then we started bringing in some really good people, and there's quite a good story of where we started as well, which was a boat on the Thames. So our first office was a boat on the Thames. There's a few disputes over why it was on a boat, but it was mainly because there was a taxi rank nearby where me, Terry and Russ could rank on for free and then walk onto the boat. But so we was on a boat mod on the Thames, and we went from 1, 2, 3, 6 employees, and I think in the end we virtually owned the old boat.
Wow. Could you have built your minimum viable product without raising as much capital? Like, I'm just trying to think, is the lesson here that if you want to build a tech startup that you need to raise money in order to get your product out? How did that work for you guys? I want to drill down just a little bit more into the particulars, because for that first 6 months, did you not start building the product? Did you wait until you had the sufficient funding? Because I see different startups funding their launch differently, right? You can fund it, you can get it done basically by having co-founders that can build the technology in-house, and you give some equity to these people, so you don't need to raise a round as early and maybe dilute your startup so fast. And then you have the startup that understands, okay, we need outside resources. You wait and you strategically find the right timing. I'm not surprised that you could raise capital quickly because of your backgrounds, because of your relationships, because of TaxiLite, right? What do you think in terms of the need to raise money right off the get-go? Do you think it's essential? How do you think back?
I think it's definitely a different world then to what it is now. Because remember, apps had only just come along. So designing on apps, building apps was probably quite difficult. So compared to nowadays, where I think you could probably get a taxi app like what Hailo was now, just off the shelf for nothing. It's like they're everywhere. So I think it's a different situation. I'm building a few other products now, and I'm thinking to myself, no one's touching you until you got an MVP built that they can see. And I'm finding that people need to have followers, and I'm a bit concerned about the entrepreneurial world at the moment, because I think they look too much at what's been done more than like to invest in stuff that's been done more than what can be achieved. You know, like that dream story. No one's seen that. There's not enough dreamers out there who go, this is going to be this product that's going to be wonderful. Go build it first, and then we'll come give you money. And then you sit there and you go, well, sorry, if I'm going to build it, I ain't coming to you to go get money. I'll go to someone who helped me, you know, not someone who said, come back when you've built something. So I think they're totally different worlds.
Yeah.
But back then, we got it spot on. I think Get was around at that time, and Get, what they done was they built a tablet. So they built a tablet which they give to drivers. So you'd think that's good, but they couldn't get it on the iPhone. So now you had all these drivers who had phones, and the only way they could give jobs was via a tablet. So with us, at least they could get it through their personal phone, which, remember, at that time, that took the cost away, which was one of the biggest selling points. You don't need a PDA and you don't need a tablet anymore. You can do it on your own phone. So now you've gone from a really expensive first time trying to get a driver to actually a cheap one because they're doing it all themselves. And if you knew some of the stories about drivers at that time, Apple should have been paying me, Terry and Russ a lot of money, because we was the best iPhone sellers there was out there. We had old guys coming in and going, here's a box, give me my email, sign me up, you know, and we stood there and done it.
That's true. You were selling what would have normally been some laggards and not technology early adopters, right? Because you were able to sell them on the benefit of being part of the Hailo network, right? They were going to make more money. They were going to increase their efficiency rate. It was a win for the drivers, right? And the customers paid the same amount. Me as a customer, whether I'm hailing a taxi on the street or whether I'm booking something in advance through the Hailo app, I paid the exact same thing. How did you find the customers? So the driver's side makes total sense. You had an unfair advantage. You came from the space. You had perfect messaging. How did you go out there and find the customers? Because I think that was, and in most businesses, that's really where it all comes down to.
So this is quite a good story as well. This goes down to when we had that meeting where it was like 3 on this side, 3 on that side, and it virtually was 3 drivers versus 3 customers. But you couldn't get a better dialogue, because it was, no, customers want this, and we're going, no, but drivers want this, and they was going, but you're charging this, and we're going, yeah, but you don't realise why we're doing it. they got the better deal, to be honest. At that time, every radio circuit charged you a big running fee to go pick them up, a booking fee. By the time you even got in, it was like £10 on the clock, and they charged VAT, they charged all these things. They said to us, we want drivers. We said, we can get you drivers, because we was like the most positive people in the world. We'll get you every driver in the world, which down the line we virtually did. We're going to get you every driver. And they said, okay, can you get every driver, but can we get rid of the run-ins? Oh, I don't know, run-ins. And then we'd convince ourselves. So as we was convincing ourselves, we was virtually performing our own sales for when we go talk to drivers. So they were saying, don't do that. Can we give them 5 minutes waiting time? And you're like, are you taking the 5 minutes waiting time? You've turned up and now you've got to wait 5 minutes. And we'd go, this is us. We'd go, yeah, okay, 5 minutes waiting time. And then it was like, and no credit card, and no gratuity, and none, like all the benefits that the radio circuits was giving drivers. We then had to go get drivers and convince them, come join us. It was like no one else, honestly, no one else without the confidence that we had would have gone for that, you know, and said, we'll take that on. It was like they was laughing at us, going, go get that for us, going, they're never going to do it, but we'll get some of it. Do you get what I mean? So we went that and we solved that story. And because, now thinking about it, because they was asking us and we were selling ourselves, we now knew how to sell to our customer, the driver. So now we're telling the driver, give them a free run-in. Look, we got less work. These guys are going home with people in, and you're not. People can't afford to pay this money. And we convince them to do that. So when you say, how do we get customers? So one of them was that. It was selling the drivers to sell this product. Tell the customer, do you know that normally it's 5 minutes? I'm giving you 5 minutes waiting time. I'm coming to you for nothing. They then become your biggest salesperson. Whether we wanted it that way, and there was a few things with how did we get customers. One is we had the back seats. So, you know, when you in London, when you get into the back of a black taxi, there's drop-down seats and there's advertising on these drop-down seats.
Right.
Another thing, this is how good we are at sales. So when you used to go to the stations, someone would come round with advertisements and they'd say, I'll pay you £10 to put advertisement in the back. And you'd go, lovely jubbly, take a £10, probably get around the corner and take them out, whatever. We convinced all our drivers to take that for nothing. We said, this is yours. Take it for nothing. So we saved money there. So now every person who got in the back of a taxi, they had a back flip seat. They had a sticker, and we had great design at that time. We had stickers like, our branding was so good. We should go into the branding in a minute because it was really good. But we had really good stickers going to the customers, promo codes going to the customers. We had receipt pads going to the customers, cards going to the customers. We hit them with everything. So one is driver to customer, very good. Two is, and I think people forget about this, we was in an industry where apps, everyone had apps, every single person. You downloaded every app. And we was the top of the travel apps. We was the top of the next best thing. So we was on there quite a lot. We knew how to not manipulate the app store, but we knew certain tricks, which was quite good. If you don't know them, I'll tell you afterwards.
Off air.
Yeah, off air. You can, work it out that you're up there all the time. Free, probably, we had the best logo out there. I mean, Hailo, it was brilliant. I always wondered why people never mixed it up and called it How and forgot the O underneath, because it's quite funny. And I always said the name actually was wrong because more people would search How than they would, you can see it now, than Hailo. They didn't. So they must have been getting that message from somewhere. So we never done TV adverts in the early days. I don't think we've done anything else. What we did do, see this black cab here, or yellow cab. Our first cabs never had back in black or the Hailo, the cab. It just had the Hailo sign. So we had 200 yellow taxis wrapped. And Ron, who was my co-founder, had a good relationship with someone who done these taxis and got a really good deal. So we had more taxis out there than anyone else. They was bright yellow. Drivers was talking about them.
Yeah, that's pretty bright.
What's that?
Yeah, I said that's pretty bright. That is a vibrant yellow you got going here.
Yeah, most definitely. So it was big, bright. It was our brand. As I said, everyone was downloading apps. So we was fortunate that everyone was trying everything. And I think the other thing is at that time, I know the others did it as well, but we had a product that done something. So we had a product that you could do something on a phone and it actually does a service outside of the phone, similar to like Deliveroo, Just Eat, etc. Now, it was a useful tool for these people.
Yeah.
So we had a really good combination of, and we had a great marketing. Oh, funny enough, we had one of the best social media guys at that time, because remember, social media weren't really about at that time. Actually, he was a Canadian as well. It was quite funny because hopefully he'll get to watch this, because I think we did make him our second choice when we was employing him. But he was that was a joke. Hopefully he'll watch it. But he was brilliant. His name was Chris McKellen, and this guy was me, Terry, Russ, Ron, Jay, and Casper, but on social media. Like he was constant. I mean, he used every single bit of social media, planning. He done absolutely everything at first. He was brilliant. So to have someone like him on board doing that early stuff, and he's still around today and still brilliant. Yeah. So we was fortunate having that.
I keep thinking about timing, Gary, when you're walking through this story. Like, I'm not saying that things weren't executed beautifully. I'm just saying that there was probably less noise in the channels that you chose, right? You found ways to get your message out at a particular point in time in a particular channel it was in your favor, right? Because if you try to do that on social media today, you need a bigger budget, right? If but I guess pros and cons, because if you try to create the actual application now, it costs pennies compared to when you created the application. But I still think that timing was one of the greatest resources on your side through the Hailo endeavor. It really seems like there was a huge shift in the world, in the technology and the market, and you guys jumped right on it. You guys didn't waste any time, because actually you had started your first taxi startup before the actual iPhone came out, right? So call it luck, call it timing, call it everything. You nailed it.
Yeah, I think. I think with timing, I think something that we done as well. I think I mentioned it earlier, where there was 8 other people that come out. I think that done us a favour as well, because not that they failed, but people got used to using it, and they knew they started to know what it was. And we did sit there, and there was times when people said, "Are you worried?" And I thought, if anyone's working as hard as we are, if anyone's coming up with ideas as good as we are, then we'll get beat. But we had such confidence. We went, no one's doing it. No one's signing as many drivers. How many drivers we signed up was double the amount what get signed up,
Yeah.
And the technology we was doing was wonderful. No one knows how good our first driver app was. It was amazing. It was like absolutely drivers, they loved it, so they used it. So when it's timing, I think it was a mixture of, everything coming into at that right time. But then timing at the beginning, we got it right, but it might have been wrong because further down the line, then it messes up your timing. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. Before we do, though, let's talk about brand. You mentioned brand. I personally love brand. It relates to what we're talking about right now, between the marketing, between the messaging. What would you say you guys did right when it comes to brand?
I think Ron, one of our co-founders, he was quite instrumental with brand. I think he'd already had a company. I can't remember what they was called, but he had a company, so he knew about big marketing, big branding, so he knew how to do it. He was the guy who said, "No, it's yellow, and we want 200 of them, and it's all about getting that message out there, Hailo, Hailo, Hailo." So he was the expert within that, and I was quite fortunate that I worked alongside on that sort of stuff. I was in the marketing meetings, helping, etc. And so, it was a good, but no one done brand the way we done it, especially for the money. We had money, but we didn't have Uber money, stuff like that.
You guys putting most of your budget towards dev anyways, right? Like you guys had, I don't know how many, I saw an article where you had 70 plus developers, like just working on a single application. So I would imagine that the lion's portion of the budget went there. You probably had to get a little bit more creative from a brand and marketing standpoint.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, we was like the trendy sort of thing. I suppose Uber was the more trendy because they always done the social aspects of someone it's not as trendy someone getting outside of a black cab as it is getting outside of a limousine, and stuff like that. So they probably had that social side, and I think we had that middle ground where we was trendy for the older people. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Which was black taxi users. So we was quite fortunate there. Yeah.
Yeah. From a product perspective, did you guys really have a minimum viable product, or how did you implement the different phases? Because again, you said that your product was better than everybody else's. Was this because when you did raise rounds of financing, you put the lion's share of funding towards product? What was your mindset with regards to how many features you needed to have, how much attention you needed to put into the product? How did you balance how much money to sink into it versus just how to optimize the user experience? What was the philosophy around product in those early days?
Okay, so on the technical front of employing, Jay went after the best of the best. If they didn't have Google, Apple, Amazon within their CV, he probably never took them on. Like he took on the best people, but he took on the great young talent as well. So we had really good dev. You probably find that in the early stages, we had guys who was doing 10 people's jobs. We was quite fortunate. We're on this boat And I remember going downstairs because we was sort of upstairs making phone calls. They was downstairs with water on their feet. But they was doing 10 times what everyone else was doing. I'd never once within all my time at Hailo think to myself, someone's slacking, or someone's not doing it. And we all know that technical people do roll in at 10, 11 o'clock, but who cares that when they're chatting on a Saturday night, so it don't matter, does it? So I'd never ever thought that way. I thought we had the best people. With regards to the customer product, I think his simplicity at its best is George Babowski, who was he then become the product guy. He made it very streamlined and very easy. Stuff like if you open most apps today, they ask you to sign up. If you open Hailo in the early days, you see taxis. So you knew straight away, what does it do? If that was our first sale point, that screen that you showed where it shows you taxis, that's our first sales point is, there's a taxi nearby me. Oh, press here, done. And it was like really simplistic. So, but that doesn't mean the back end was simplistic, because then you had Jose probably building the formation of how do you dispatch? How does it dispatch? How many seconds do you give each driver? When does how does a driver go through a tunnel, and does he stay alive, or can we keep his internet going? We had all them problems. Remember, people don't have them problems nowadays. We was using iPhone 4s. Now, if you went back and built technology for an iPhone 4 now, you'd go, oh my God, these signals go in and out, etc. So being able to do all that stuff in the back end, that's probably what we spent most of our time on. But again, we had a driver app, which was feature led. So we had a customer app, which was simplicity led, and a driver app, which was feature led.
Interesting. I would imagine you had a natural advantage, though, building the driver application with your involvement, because you already knew how to make it a simplistic experience from your own experience, right? I spend a lot of time on the First Customer Club podcast talking to entrepreneurs and founders, specifically around the industry insider versus industry outsider sort of question. You have entrepreneurs that will identify an opportunity in a market where they know nothing about, and they'll jump in head first. And they'll find some advisors. They'll learn as fast as they can. They'll be very customer centric because they have to be. And then you have the other kind of startup, which is probably the least risky and the most likely to succeed, which is you've done it all your life. You know the industry inside and out. It means perhaps you can cut a corner here and there, and every single time you're thinking about where to put a button or how to transition from one screen to the next, you can kind of make assumptions that are accurate almost every single time, because your world was drivers. Your world was the cabbies. Do you agree with that statement? Do you think that it was just an inherent advantage because everything you guys did on the driver's side, you kind of just got right automatically? And if you weren't sure, you had like hundreds or thousands of people you could ask.
You're totally right. So one thing is that as myself, and I was probably coming up with most of the product ideas, and you're totally right about product, is building something for drivers is completely different to building for normal customers, but you'd learn so much from it, because one is drivers are driving along. So if they build a button, you go, you don't build a button that small because they're driving along. Or
Right.
you don't put the accept button next to when they're telling them they're free and busy. And they're like, they can't fathom that things have to be in certain ways. So there was further down the line, I was getting I'm quite picky with product and how it should be. But I always said to them, remember the old telephone? I always go back to other products, and this goes back to, remember the little kids' telephone, which had the red triangle and the circle and the square? That's how a button should be. A button should be big, bold, yeah? This guy, all he wants, is to accept a job. Why are you making it hard for him to accept a job? Everything we done was about how do we get that driver to accept the job? So we would have a big bell noise, oh, but why are we going to put big bell? That's going to annoy him. Don't care. It's going to get them to take a job. And in the end, they love that. So building that product around, you're totally right, drivers, but none of it ever come from, a lot of it did come from me. I take so much information in. Like I said, I probably eventually by that time had 4,000 or 5,000 drivers in my phone book. I spoke to every single one of them. So I spoke to every single one of them. I probably bored them to tears with why they should use Hailo, why they should tell the customer to use it, ask them what problems they've had, ask them what the customer's like, and then I put it in my head. And then what I used to do was combine it all in there, and then I would come out with an answer. Now, I don't know where I got that answer, but it would come out, and the majority of times it come out right, not because of me, but because I had so much data in my head coming from them people. I think it was a bit off-putting as we went further down the line because people didn't grasp that. They see data as written data, and it was like, I know this because of this. And they'd go, well, show me it in writing. And you go, no, I can't show you in the writing. I've just been talking to a driver, or, you know, and he's told me that information. So, but that was like probably the second stage of when Hailo become a proper business. And now it was about, oh crap, how do we get drivers to take jobs? How do we do this? It goes from, look, we was on a quest of a wave. I don't think we done anything wrong for 2 years. We was just like, we was just absolutely flying. It was, nothing was bad. And then all of a sudden, then you start, other employees come in, and then remember, employees come in, it must have been hard for people because employees come in and they have to do a job. And it's quite hard when you got founders who are all doing jobs as well, because one, you might feel a bit intimidated, and two is like, well, I have to prove myself. I've got to prove myself doing my job.
Right.
Well, I've always been the sort of person of, you know what, if I make your job easier, take it. Go away and take it. I'm not sitting there going, oh, you're not doing your job because I'm doing your job for you. I'm hopefully helping people do things quicker. And that mainly most of the ideas of problem solving, just making things easier for everyone. So if you problem solve really well, all you do is save time to do fun things or do more problem solving.
I love that. So you guys made real headway in London, England, and the surrounding regions. And then you had a pretty aggressive expansion strategy. You raised venture capital from Union Square Ventures, Excel Partners, Sir Richard Branson, and others. And then you had a pretty aggressive expansion strategy. How did you decide where you wanted to expand? Because I've been asked that question by a lot of entrepreneurs. They might have a business that is still bootstrapping. They might have raised millions of dollars like you. In your case with Hailo, how did you decide what your next market was going to be?
Okay, so from that point of view, that was more down to Ron, Jay, and Casper and the team that was doing more the customer side and expansion, etc.
Yeah.
So they've decided, I mean, so the first one we went to was Ireland. And it's quite funny because we went to Ireland. I can't say too much about it. So we go to Ireland, and we go to Ireland, and at that time, Ireland was discounting all their taxi fares. If you went to Ireland, they was in such recession that people was discounting every radio circuit discounted. And we went out there, and they went, we got a discount. And we sat there, me, Terry, and Russ, and we went, no, you don't discount. What you do is you don't discount a all, then you get driver supply. And then when you get driver supply, what you do get is you get a taxi coming to you very quickly, where although they was discounting, you couldn't get a taxi in Ireland. If you phoned up a radio circuit, you couldn't get a taxi in Ireland because they was discounting. So you were saving money, but you couldn't go anywhere to spend your money. So we said to them, don't discount, go in there, let's do it at meter fare. You're getting a good service, you're getting a free pickup, you're getting 5 minutes, and they always take credit for it and go, oh yeah, well, they said about the discount. And we said, get rid of it. They did do that. And we went out there and we spoke to drivers, and they got all on board, and Dublin really successful. But we always had we had a really good team in Dublin as well. So the people, we had free, what we done was probably not so much our decision, but we had free drivers similar to ourselves. So we had 3 drivers in London, and what they wanted to do that in every city. So what they done was they went out and got 3 drivers, and we was really fortunate. The 3 of them was really good. So they went out there, we spoke to them, they done the sale that we was doing. And when you say, where do you get your entrepreneurial and where does that come from as a taxi driver?
Yeah.
taxi driver is entrepreneurial because one is they've gone and got a job. Two is they know how to go out and work. Drivers are very clever at making money. Even like
They know how to sell.
they know how to. They're the best salespeople, aren't they? You ever been in the back of a taxi? They'll sell you anything. So they know how to sell. They know how to talk. They know how to adapt conversation. It was really funny. Recently, I left FreeNow about 9 months, nearly a year ago, and just before I left, they said, "What we want to do is we want to give taxi drivers lessons to be psychiatrists, right? So we want taxi drivers to be psychiatrists so they can help the people in the back." And I stood there and I went, "Are you joking? Taxi drivers are the best psychiatrists in the world, and you want to tell them how to do their job?" Every person who gets into a taxi is getting hundreds and hundreds of pounds of free psychiatry anyway. You can get in the back and talk to a taxi driver about absolutely anything, and he will give you an opinion on it. You come out of that like you've just let all your anger out, everything, and it's like, "Oh, by the way, take a 50p tip," and he's just done the world for you. But I think what happened with that, funny enough, with the psychiatry thing, is it hindered us quite early on when Uber come to London. So when Uber come to London, it went from this company come in, and by the way, we probably done the worst publicity on, because we as a taxi industry give Uber so much publicity by talking about them. No one would have known about them. But every taxi driver who then went from being your psychiatrist, you now become his psychiatrist, because what happened was you got into their taxi and he'd go, "Have you heard of that Uber?" And you'd go, "No, I've never heard of them." He'd go, "Bloody hell, what they do is they're giving you cheaper rides, but they're in crap cars, but they're giving you cheaper rides and they come pick you up and they're nicking our jobs. And so you know they're psychiatrists, so you're not as eased when you get in there. And then when you get out, you go, by the way, mate, what was that company called again? Oh, it was Uber." And then, so a lot of the stuff that we've done as taxi drivers actually help benefit them. I mean, I don't think they spent anything on their London launch, because the taxi industry demoed when they launched. I mean, Uber was quite clever. They launched on the day that London taxi drivers was doing a big demo against Uber, and they launched with taxi drivers. That was the nerve of them, So they virtually what they done was, and I always say this about a sales thing, is if you create an enemy, then or a fear, then that's a really good sales pitch, or to get people to join you. I mean, you're definitely seeing it at the moment, aren't you? In the world at the moment, it's like anyone can lead someone to any sort of political anything, at the moment. So they've done that quite well against us, yeah.
Yeah. What was it like fighting against Uber, specifically in North America, specifically in New York? You guys had raised north of 100 million. They raised north of 1.2 billion, around maybe similar timings from my perspective here. What was it like fighting head to head with those guys?
So we never felt like me, Terry Russ, the London or Hailo felt like they was our competition. I think Jay, our CEO, did. He see them as competition coming in. He was quite like, he was forward thinking, and he see that they was going to do what they done. So they never felt like they was our enemy, because when they first come, we was on such a roll. We was doing all okay anyway. So, but when it comes to North America, so first of all, I think we launched in New York. I think that might have been before the USV money. I think we might have gone to New York, and we was virtually going into a battleground there where Uber was going into every other city and facing legal battles. We sort of went into a legal battle, and we was trying to help the licensed taxis there.
Right.
Yet we was classed as the enemy. And we were sitting there and we're thinking, what do you mean? We're here to help you. We're not here to go against you. We're not Uber. We're not these black cars going around picking you up. We actually want to use licensed taxis. And I don't think they took to us as much as they should. And I don't know whether that was because me, Terry and Russ didn't have that much involvement in that North America side, because we was fighting our own battle back home in London, if you know what I mean. I mean, we did go out to New York and we used to speak to drivers, etc. But what you got to understand with New York, yellow taxis are completely different to black taxis. And by the way, I don't think there's a lot of talk where people go, have you ever been in a yellow taxi? Oh, they're rubbish. They're nowhere near as good black taxis. To be honest, I've never had a bad taxi driver. And the reason, in any city, in any world I've ever been to, I've never had a bad taxi driver. Maybe one because I probably mentioned I'm a taxi driver straight away. That
might help.
That really helps. And when you say you're a black taxi driver, you're like the god of the world to all other taxi drivers around the world. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's my personality, or maybe I'm a bit more. Like people get in taxis and then they moan that they're 10 minutes late to get somewhere when they left an hour late. And so there's certain people who don't like taxi drivers. So I don't want to class London taxi drivers better because everyone's a human being. And I think every taxi driver, anyone who goes out and picks someone up and takes them around, they're all good people anyway. So New York, but they didn't have that. It was a higher turnover as well. So if you sign up a driver in New York, he could be gone in a week. If you sign up a taxi driver in London, he's going to be here till he's 70. That's the difference. So you're now going to cities in the US where it's not that they're not the same people. It's not their full-time job, so it don't mean so much to them. But I know Chicago really adapted, and we went out to Chicago and spoke to them drivers, and they all seemed to adapt, and they all had the technology. But I just don't think we had. I think we was fighting Uber there, where we weren't fighting Uber as much in London because private hire was already in London, where Uber in the other cities was really attacking the taxi industries.
Yeah. Was it an issue also in New York because of an expectation that people can just go outside and there will be taxis waiting for you? Was there perhaps a surplus of taxi supply in general? So people didn't want to actually spend the time to open an app and do the booking. Maybe it was just more consumer behavior expected to walk outside and see something. Were there cultural differences that you saw that were more challenging in New York as compared to London?
Yeah, I think you're right. Definitely. I remember when we was out in New York, you come out and there was taxis everywhere. But then there's always a time, especially in New York, when they cross over, or like when they're changing, or there's peak times. So there was always a use for an app because you don't always walk out and put your hand out. So I don't think it was so much that. I think it was a case of London had a two-tier system, taxis, private hire. It's always been there. Now imagine you've got taxis and then you introduce this new private hire system. So I don't think it was a case of the technology or yellow taxis. It was, look, if they would have just introduced black cars to be able to pick up off the street, because wherever we talk about Uber, what they do, it's illegal. And I might be controversial here because anyone you speak to from the world says, no, it's not. It's applying for hire. So to become a taxi driver in London, you're allowed to apply for hire, which means you can put your hand up on the street. If you drive a yellow taxi in New York, you've now got the right, and they pay a lot of money. I think they was paying about $170 a day for a taxi in New York, which is like ridiculous. By the time you take out, if you look into it, it was about $170 a day. We met up with a guy out there, and the poor sod, he'd just signed up for one day. He'd paid $170.
We're talking rental costs.
Rental costs. Yeah. At that, remember, this was nearly 10 years ago. So this is when the medallions was very high, so it was very high. This was when the yellow taxis was sort of booming before they weren't booming. So they was paying lots of money for that, and they was earning hardly anything. Now, everyone was out on the streets and they was constantly getting taxis anyway. But if you bring on an extra, God knows how many thousands of, even if you put on yellow taxis, the yellow taxis would have struggled. Do you get what I mean? And then all of a sudden they put all these, and you can look at it anyways. And I used to be a bit less argumentative about it, about a licensed taxi can apply for hire, which means they can put their hand up on the street. All Uber done was put their hand up on the street into a phone. There is no delay. There is nothing. I know how the technology works. You press a button, it goes to the driver. The driver then comes to pick you up. You're applying for hire. So they was quite fortunate when they got away with it. And I think, you know what? That probably hindered us quite a bit as well. Because we sat there and we went, Uber can't come to London. And we don't, why, what do you mean they can't come to London? And I'd go to Jay, they can't come to London because they don't apply for hire. Their technology applies for hire, yet they got away with it. And they've done that ever since. So, yeah, it's quite unfair. And that's why a lot of the taxi industry are so negative and they do all these demos across, because they feel hard judged by, you know, because they've spent all that money and that time and then someone's just come along and doing their job. I mean, you wouldn't get someone off the street to come in and do your electricity for you and then walk away, but virtually that's what you're doing because they're not qualified. Sorry, that was a little bit of a rant for my fellow taxi users. Drivers.
Oh, that's hey, you're coming at it from a perspective of passion too, right? Because I guess there was two sides of that whole argument. There was the rideshare movement, which was kind of against the whole taxi cab movement as well. And you literally had tens of thousands of friends there, and that was your background. We talked about insider, outsider a little bit, but to add on that, you had a huge advantage starting this business because you were an insider. How do you feel about the direction of where the story went? Do you feel that you were biased in a good way to start because you knew things? What do you think about the bias that you carried later on? Would you think there was an opportunity to have pivoted, to have actually competed more directly with Uber, to actually take that model and leverage it yourself? Or when you look back on it now, how do you feel?
Okay, so this probably goes into the story of, in London, there was a time when we wasn't covering all the work because taxi drivers, they can pick up off the street. So it was always a hindrance for us because they could pick up off the street, which means they weren't available and they would accept that job. And even though, remember, we give free run-ins, we give 5 minutes waiting time, yet the person on the street putting their hand out, that don't cost them nothing. So then it became a stage where drivers was thinking to themselves, I'm always going to put the street work ahead of the app work. Not all of them, because a lot of them, they liked it because it's easier. Sometimes once you've got a job on your screen, you can turn your radio on, you can have your hand out of the window, you can chill out to the next customer if that's all going okay.
True.
So we weren't covering all the work. I don't think we done enough dispatch wise. I think we was the best at dispatching probably out there, but we could have done a lot more. One of my biggest passions is how we dispatch to drivers. And the big thing with technology, sometimes, you know what it is? A lot of the young people come into technology now, but they don't look back in history. So they don't know how things worked before. They just assume they're going to solve a problem. But sometimes there's problems that don't need solving or they've been solved before. So one is dispatching. We know that having 100 people taking a phone call in a office like it used to work and sending driver to driver and is not very efficient because you've got 100 employees. But should you replicate what they done? Most certainly, because what they was good at is if there was a driver going somewhere and there was somewhere nearer, they could always divert them, etc. So maybe there's certain stuffs where I love the dispatching side because I once had this conversation in a boardroom with we had a CEO come in from he was from America. He come in and I said, and it didn't matter what if it was Uber, whether it was us, whether it was Diddy or whoever dispatches the best, will win the market, because our true goal as an app was efficiency. If you can get a driver who's 50% of the time busy, if you can make that up just to 25%, actually it's a 50% increase in their time. And that was one of the tools that we had in our early app. We used to have the percentage of time that you was busy. So drivers used to come to us and go, you know what, Gal, I used to be 30% and now I'm 70%. He don't even have to know that he's earning more money. Just logic tells you you're earning more money.
Yeah.
So efficiency, they all took their eye off the ball. I don't believe anyone's as efficient as they should be. They all bring in match and, like, oh, I'm going to pick this one up and I'm going to pick this one up. And they never done it if you went back to the old taxi systems, if you just replicate that, then you'd probably be a lot more efficient. So instead of going to drivers, we've got to charge you more, or
Right.
customers, we've got to charge you, now that efficiency actually comes into profit. It's like I wrote a presentation on every minute counts. And the point was imagine your scenario. You've got 1 hour a day of a driver, so you've got 60 minutes. If every one of them are worth £1, you now know that if you keep them efficient, it's £60, which means you've got more profit. So if you can keep making a minute here, so it goes back on the philosophy of, our first philosophy was, we're going to give a free run in. That's 5 minutes. So knock that off your 60 quid. You're already £5 down for that driver. You're now giving 5 minutes waiting time. You're now 5 minutes down. So that's 10 minutes. You've now, you start adding that all up. And actually, that's what I mean by efficiency. It doesn't even have to be about pickup. It's about how do you keep that driver as busy as possible and make money out of your customer, which you're doing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You guys were able to make profit in some markets and not others. Toronto, you were profitable. Why were you profitable in Toronto and not other cities?
We was really fortunate. We had a really good team in Toronto. You know, like, if you imagine you had America, it was more of a case of America was all small. We was in New York, we had a massive team. We was in Washington, we had like a small team. Boston, we started off, we had a small team, but they was a good team. But Toronto had like a really good come out, what is it? You know, like get-togetherness sort of thing. And Justin Raymond was one of the guys who was managing there. He's a Canadian guy, and actually Chris McKellen, the social media guy who I spoke to about earlier, who started up, he was out there as well. So it was very similar-ish to what we had in Ireland and in London. They seemed to take to it a lot better. But I think we ended up moving out of North America, and I think the big surprise was that we pulled out of Toronto as well, because it probably, I don't think it was profitable, but it was nearly there. You know, it was just about to be profitable. So it was a shame because we ended up losing the whole side of that North America, and Toronto and the rest of Canada.
Yeah. What was your mentality thinking back on competition? Did you care? Were you looking over your shoulder? Or were you focused on what you were going to do next? Because you were not just competing against Uber. That's the biggest name that comes to mind. There were others.
Yeah, so in Ireland, we was very fortunate. No one ever really launched in Ireland, and they're public transport, so they're quite different because it's completely different to most other places. In London, we had Get. Get
Right.
was never when they was called Get Taxi at the time. We had some other smaller apps, but we never cared about them. And like I said, we're quite confident people, and we thought we're the best. It doesn't matter. So we had Get. Get virtually went from, they copied everything we done, and I've been there the whole length. And there was a turning point where we just weren't. Maybe the teams had changed, or I can't remember what stages it was. We weren't so much product led. We went through a stage where we weren't feature led, and I think you have to have new innovation, new features coming out quite often, not just to show customers, but to make money and other stuff. And I think at that time, as well as going to New York and going to the America, we also started building a platform within Hailo, which would help us launch in numerous cities very easy, like a white label. Boom, launch a city. And I think we spent a fortune on that and too much time on that to then be feature led and be able to build these features. But
Yeah.
virtually, it took up too much of our time, I believe. And it probably stopped us building any features then. And by the time it was ready, then we'd got to a stage where we'd probably spent quite a bit of the money anyway. So I think it probably was a mistake to do that. I think we was looking at technology probably maybe too far forward. We didn't know what we was. We didn't know whether we was a digital company, an operational company, a product company. We didn't know what it was. We went to the Churchill War Museum. We had an American CEO I spoke about, and he took us to the Churchill War Museum, and he said, what company are we? And we all wrote down what company we are. And we said, are we a tech company? Are we an operational company? And everyone said, well, technically we're an operational company because we're good at that. What we're good at, we're not as good at technology, but we're really good at customer service. We're nice people. We know how to speak to people. We know what customers want. Okay, we're operational. Actually, I went tech because I love tech. So I chose tech. And it come out and everyone put operational, and he went, yeah, it says operational. We're a tech company.
Yeah.
totally went against what we was, which must have ruined most of the people there, you know, and thought, oh my God, what are we? If you don't know what you are, then it's very hard. I think we was probably a bit of all of them, but we started to get lost at that time. I think Jay had moved on by then because obviously I think Tom Barr was the CEO from America. He come in as Jay's mentor and ended up taking over from Jay. So I think that's when we started losing our way. And I don't think one thing with Jay, he was that guy, you know, like you said about going and getting funding and investors following that dream. He was, you tell me whatever you want to do and I'll give you money. He was that sort of person because he'd been and done it for eCourier, and he just knew how to walk out of a room or walk into a room 20 minutes late, you know.
You guys had a team of 6 co-founders. What was the dynamic of that? Would you do it again? Would you have 6 co-founders if you were to do another startup tomorrow? You have a few startups right now in stealth mode. You often hear the expression, too many cooks in the kitchen. How do you think that applied here? Was it really clear who was steering the ship? How did it work having 6 arguably perfectly selected humans, but at the same time, hey, there were 6 of you?
You know what? Because it was one of our first entrepreneurial things, we didn't know. We didn't know. When my first one was, it's taxi, like there's 5 of us. Let's all just go 5 ways. I wouldn't have the audacity to say, let's give them 5%, let's give him 3%, let's give me more. I'm not that sort of person at all. I don't never want to come across as greedy. And I remember having a meeting, and me and Russ used to do quite a few meetings with people get in touch with us, and we used to be in Somerset House, where if you've ever been to London, Somerset House is like this beautiful courtyard. It's on the Strand, it's right in the middle, and the sun would be shining, and there'd be cafes, and it was a beautiful place to work. So we'd go out there and meet people for coffees, and we was having a chat with a guy who was interested in us, and he went, 6 founders, 6 co-founders. He said, that's unheard of. What, and you're all still here? That's unheard of. No one had ever heard of it. And that was probably about 2, I can't remember when Jay went, because Jay was the first one to go. But that's how he was. It was like, we didn't know any different. So was it the right thing to do? And by the way, it was never 6 co-founders. I would have loved it if they'd have come in and gone, we're all on the same, but we never was. We were 3 taxi drivers. So when we come in, although we was co-founders, equity-wise, we was probably on 10 times less than the other 3 founders. So, but we didn't know any different. And to be honest, it was a gamble. We stayed at Taxi Light, and we would have kept on plodding along. Or that, by the way, they never would have made it without us. They might have thought they could have got into this business without us, but I don't think they knew what they got when they got us. Yeah. I think they wanted their name. It's run by taxi drivers. They know the business. And I think they could have probably picked any 3 taxi drivers out there and used that as a system, but I don't think they ever expected what they got from us or what they did get. Yeah. So nowadays, I'm in a few different things, and maybe my mentality is very similar-ish because I got less there is always be equal going in, etc. I don't think does it matter how many co-founders? I'm doing an art project at the moment, and you know what? I want everyone to be a co-founder. Let everyone in the world be a co-founder. It's like being a co-founder of. You've been founders of or co-founders of other companies. Yes. What's better than putting that on your business card? Isn't it? A founder or whatever. So, and what does it matter who's... to me, it's a bit more of a name thing than...
Yeah, I agree. I think from my experience, it comes down to not who is considered a co-founder, but who is making decisions and who has the control. Because sometimes when you have multi-founder teams, everybody's trying to be the CEO. Regardless of who has the title, who's actually making the decisions. You have someone who is a strong idea guy like yourself. You have someone who's executing in a particular role. You have someone who is out there talking to the media and customers all the time, who feels that they're the face of the company and with certain level of entitlement. That's just where I've seen, it's good to have very distinct roles. And that seems like something that you've done well in building Hailo. Is although there were 6 of you, it seemed like everybody gravitated in a certain direction, right? It seemed like, everyone was doing 10 jobs at the same time, but, you weren't doing the same 10 jobs as someone else. It seemed like you guys were able to decide, okay, I'm going to own this area and you're going to own that area. And that's probably why it worked as well as it did.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So when you say there were 6 co-founders, yourself, when you do a startup, you're doing everything.
Yeah.
You do a bit of everything. And I love knowing everything. I don't want to not know anything. I want to learn how to wash the dishes, do everything to the top, learn as you're going along. But what we did do, we done that at the beginning, and then it starts falling into place. And then Terry was the guy I got in to do the more operational side on Taxi Light. He then just fell into the operational side because he liked that side. He liked sitting there, doing things, doing tasks and getting that side done. Russ was the guy who would go out there, the more salesperson. I was always product marketing. But we all fit together as well, so we could always go to each other. And even if you was doing one job, you can always get some support from the others. And then we had the customer side where we had Casper, who was the operational guy, running everything. And Jay was the CEO, like I said. By the way, that is the worst picture. I hate that picture of myself.
Okay, I'm going to go to this picture, because if I was to define success, if you can find a picture that's photo stock on Getty Images of yourself, Gary, to me, that's how I define success. So congratulations.
Yeah, no, that's true. You know what? There's a couple of things that I did do Bloomberg. I did do so I done the BBC. I done driving a taxi. I did do Bloomberg, and I've done a few of these. I'm quite humble in it, and I try not to like this. I'm never looking back at this. I'm never going to go back and watch it. I'm that sort of person. But I have done a few things like Bloomberg. To be on Bloomberg, and I'm a taxi driver, and then I am sitting on Bloomberg talking about going against Uber. And one that made Jay really jealous. We was out in New York. So we was out in New York, and me and Russell was in there, and the New Yorker wanted to speak to us. So the New York, to me, I don't even know what the New Yorker is, yeah? So the New Yorker want to speak. I'll tell you another story in a second about New York. So we're out in New York, and the New Yorker want to speak to us, and we speak to him, and we chat to him. We get our names in the paper. So we're in the New Yorker. We don't care about it. We're just doing our job. Jay sent us an email and said, my only wish ever was to get mentioned in the New Yorker. And he said, you 2 guys went and done it. So, and we're like, I don't even know what a New Yorker is, So that was a good one. The other one was we was out in New York, and the UK British ambassadors and that come up to us and said, how long are you here for? And we said, we're here for a couple of days. They said, we've got this big ceremony where Britain and America join together, and they do this big publicity. And David Cameron, who was the Prime Minister at the time, and Prince Harry was there. So me and Russell go to this event with Terry, and we're there and we're chatting. So Russell's quite, and that's why he's there, he's quite forward. So he starts chatting to Prince Harry. And at the same time as he was, and this is in the early days, he was getting Prince Harry with an iPhone in his hand, holding it, pressing the Hailo app.
Cool.
It, like that was the sort of audacity that we had, where we just didn't really seem to care, But we went back. They didn't even know what we was doing. And we went back to them and said, oh, by the way, we've got some pictures for social media of us talking to David Cameron. And Prince Harry at that time was like the biggest celebrity out there, So we had some good times. But we don't, until I don't even remember it. I don't even think about it or take much notice of it. But coming from a taxi driver to do that and follow that, it is a bit of a story. But I always say until the day I get out, which I got out recently, but the day I got out and then you think, yeah, this is what I've done. But I don't really think about it much.
How much do you think you have changed as a person since this journey started? We're talking today on Father's Day specifically, so happy Father's Day on the record, Gary, and I'm sorry for my ignorance in booking a podcast on your special day.
I did say that to my wife. No, I didn't really. I did say my 4 kids come down. I've got 2 kids in university and the other 2 kids, and it's lucky I'm quite humble and I don't care because I don't think any of them really went Happy Father's Day. So, but no.
How would you say, in terms of where you were at the beginning of this journey to where you are now, that you've essentially now you've fully translated yourself out of the business, right? You're free now. How much have you changed in this journey, being put in a position where you have an international startup company that is growing internationally, and you did that with a family and 4 children at home? What was that roller coaster, and how different is Gary Jackson today compared to back in, let's say, 2008?
Yeah, so I've never really thought about it, but one is I'm really fortunate that my wife's been really good throughout the last 10 years. She's been very good. I mean, she lets me sit on a laptop. She knows that whatever I'm doing is virtually to help the family anyway, and for being my psychiatrist. Because if you knew the amount of ideas I went to her and said, what do you think of this? And she says, I don't know nothing about that, you know, in a nice way. So I've got that, and my kids also for being the same, where, yeah, I'm hoping that my entrepreneurship has reached out on them, because my daughter was doing music, actually sent a WhatsApp the other day out of the blue and just went, what do you think of this idea? And I thought that's good, because she's never been that sort of person. And it was actually quite a good idea. It was about doing vouchers you could adapt it to other things. So I like the way they're thinking is adapting vouchers to stop people from letting you down. So, you know, like a restaurant is, you give them vouchers if they turn up, and you don't if they didn't. Anyway, it was a good idea. It was nice that they're coming up with an idea, and I'm helping also a lot of. I've got another company who've got I love helping young entrepreneurial people, building that up, especially people. I don't speak enough about it, but from where I come from, I don't think the entrepreneurship within people who come from rough areas is unbelievable. It annoys me that businesses just don't go out and search these people, bring them out of that, because they can adapt to absolutely everything. So I would love that people could see stuff like this and go, you know what, actually, if you're not a good reader, you're not a good writer, you've not had, I mean, I don't even remember like careers of, no one went to university or college for my whole school, you know. No. Yeah. So that's my wife bringing me my dinner, so it just shows you on Father's Day what a good wife she is. So what was we before that? It was to do with how I've changed. Yeah,
exactly.
how I've changed. I used to get really, in the early days, I'm an idea person, and what I found it really hard in the first instance, not so much today, is that people can't grasp it. I honestly believed everyone thought the way I thought. So I thought to myself, if I'm saying something, why don't they understand? Why don't they understand when I'm telling them this idea, or I'm telling them this thing, or why are they not trusting me? So in the early days, you just get really frustrated with that. I've learned a lot since then. I've become better at sort of management as well. I had a really good manager who once said to me, he said, if I'm not telling you something, then you're doing your job right. And I then adapted that, because I used to look after a driver team, etc. So I think I've come a long way that where don't expect everyone to be as good at what you do as you are. And it doesn't mean that they can't get the job done or they have to do it in your way, etc. So I think that's the one learn I'd say for me is I'm a lot more calmer in that way than anything else. So I think I've learned a lot along the way, but I can't think off the top of my head the difference between what I was then and what I was now.
Yeah. Do you look back on what you built between Taxi Light and then starting Hailo, which did a merger with MyTaxi, which did a merger, or was it an acquisition with FreeNow?
No, it was just a name change.
Oh, it's just a name change. Okay. So through
Yeah.
that journey, because you've been with it now until 2019 with FreeNow, do you look back on it as a success, as a failure? How do you personally think about it? Because you didn't achieve everything you guys set out to do. You know, you guys butted heads with Uber. Uber had more funding. Uber had more people. Uber was pretty aggressive against you guys too. And, you know, if you were to call it a competition, you guys lost that fight. But you won a ton of wars along the way, and you helped change the industry. Do you look at it as a success, failure, or both?
One is I look back and say, if we didn't do it, then the taxi industry in London probably would be dead by now. And that's my honest opinion. If Hailo never come along, one of my friends, John Swaby, who I'm working for on these other projects, always says to me, if you feel in your heart that you're doing everything right, then your conscience is clear. And I always feel like my conscience is clear, that everything I've done has been the right decision at that time. Now, was there emotion within it, and was there things that we probably could have done? Could we have took on Uber? We probably could have tried with our help, but we never wanted to help take on Uber because that was a completely different industry. But they had more money than us, and it was a fight I didn't think that we should go after. Do I still think there's a taxi industry to fight for? And listen, Uber is the taxi industry now. When I said about going back in history, people go to you, why is Uber here? And you say, well, there's no regulation around them. All that will happen is Uber will be regulated within the next 5 years, and they will become taxis. So now we're all in the same boat. All you got to do is just look back in history for there used to be an Uber years ago, but then it got regulated, and that's what become taxis. So there's a lot of learning for the young people when they come into industries that they need to look back a bit and say, there's not many things in the world that wasn't done before or learned before if you do look back to get some sort of answers. But where that relates to me, obviously I'm older. Yeah, I feel I'm I'm the same person, but I think I've learned a lot on how to deal with situations probably better and how to get things across.
How do you feel about the fact that you made Uber scared?
There was one time I spoke to an investor, VC, recently, and I was chatting to him, and he said to me, I was at a thing with Travis. And I said, what's that? And he went, we was at this thing in London, and this was in the early days. And to be honest, they had so much more money. One thing you never do, never mention, and we never done this, never mention your competition if you're above them. So one thing never do. We was Hailo, don't mention Get. Don't mention Get because you're only giving them headlines. The one mistake he probably did do, he wrote on a board something along the lines of Hailo, you've had your day, which meant that he did, yeah, Travis did, which then he made him fear. It made him feel like he feared us. I think he feared Jay more than Hailo at the time. I think they done a few New York cinema sort of things when they was on stage together, and I think they had a bit of I think they liked each other's personalities, if you know what I mean, but they see each other as enemies. So so I think we was at one point, but then I think early on they realised that money can buy everything, can't it? And it did for quite a long while. So I don't believe they're going to stay in taxis, and I'm going to give you an heads up. I think they're going to be all guns now just for Uber Eats, and that's my opinion. I think they'll get out of regulated taxis. I think they're finding it too hard. They can't bully anymore because they used to go in and bully, didn't they? They used to go into, we're going to lobby, we're going to do this. They know that they're going to have to be regulated, which means then their competitive edge is completely gone. The percentages will start coming up, although the taxi percentages are going up. It's quite a fragmented business to be in. And to me, it looks like they're putting all their guns into more that delivery side. That's my opinion anyway. I foresee stuff, but that's what I can see happening.
Well, you're currently doing consulting work in the mobility space too, right? So you've seen this all happen. You're consulting other companies that are interested in these industries, so you've seen this shift. And I guess COVID-19 has probably changed the strategic planning for some of these companies also, right? I think anybody with an aggressive position in the delivery space is in a good place to be right now. When you look at Uber, do you look at them as good people or bad people? Do you look at them from your competitive headbutting as this is just entrepreneurs fighting, or do you look at it and say, oh, there might have been some moral issues there? What do you think?
Okay, so first thing is, I got asked this question when I was younger. I generally don't hate anyone, which is amazing. I'm sure most people hate someone. I generally don't hate anyone. So no, I don't hate Uber. I think they're quite entrepreneurial. Look, if I weren't a taxi driver, did I not think along the Uber route when we was doing Taxi Light? Of course I did. But my allegiance has always been to the taxi industry. What do I see for the future? I think the actual taxi industry, there's a massive opportunity now, because what will happen is most of the older people will come out. There'll be less vehicles, but what will happen with less vehicles is you then have to use technology, and then efficiency comes in. So why have we got, like, we live in a crazy world. Why have we got taxis driving around the street and Ubers driving around the street where they should be sitting on an electric bay waiting for their next job? It's thingy, no traffic, only picked up when they want, customer satisfaction. You've got electricity vehicles. It just that will be the world soon. It won't be. I don't believe autonomous is going to be here for many, many years, although this is the build up to it. But I see that the industry will change, and it has to be more efficiency, which goes back to the boardroom when I said to Tom Barr, whoever dispatches best will win the market. And that's what I still believe. Whoever gets that efficiency, that pound a minute or that 60 minutes, if you can fill that up, that's the one who's going to win. Then drivers love you, because if they're earning money, then of course they like you.
Yeah.
So that's where I see the world. I don't see anyone as enemies. I think they went in to disrupt. That's it. He done his job really well. He went in, made loads of money, and he'll go on and do something else. He ain't in there to build us like me. Maybe it was a bit more personal. It's always been the taxi industry. He got in an industry he don't know, no allegiance, get out, and then work on to the next disruption. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty kind of you, considering the fact that Uber blocked you guys from some funding. It's pretty good that you can still look at the guy and respect him as an entrepreneur. So good on you for being a good person there, Gary.
Yeah, I think Ron, who my co-founder, Ron's Z-Guide, he was more of the. Is it a common thing for New Yorkers? We've actually from Boston, I think, Ron, to swear a lot, because Ron used to swear a lot, but he done it in a funny way. But I'm sure he swore a lot, because for him to come out and go to the newspapers and say they're stopping us from getting money, what we was really unlucky with, every time we went to go get funding, stuff like that would happen. They would block us from getting funding, etc. And also the other thing is that I think Hertz come in. They was just about to invest something like 200 million. And in them days, that was a lot of money. Just after we were out money, just about to do it, and the director then lost his job. Stuff like that. So I'm sure, I don't know so much about the finances. We had lots of hard luck stories along the way as well. Like everyone else was getting money. Get who was not even a 10% of what we was, and they've raised probably 10 times more than what we've raised, and their valuations, some of these valuations that come out, you go, oh my God, they're worth that, and we're worth what's going on? But maybe it's because we're the nice guys. We was always the nice guys, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I'm hearing. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for entrepreneurs tuning in? Or perhaps a better way to frame that, Gary, when you think back on everything that you learned and succeeded in doing and the challenges that you faced building the Hailo empire, what would you say is the biggest key lesson behind the city, or what's at the top of your mind as you now go out and build your next venture? What's the key lesson learned?
Trying to think of the key. All I can think about a key lesson learned is stuff that I learned along the way that made me broaden my mind. Like I mentioned earlier, don't think that you've got all the money in the world and think outside the box and think of anything. That always gives you that entrepreneurial edge. Innovation is my big thing. Just think of they're all problem solving. Is here's something that's got a problem. Is how do I solve that? And I believe if you get the right minds behind it, you can solve every problem. And so I think it's about, that is the biggest thing, is go out there and just solve problems, because if you do that, then that is a new product or a new way of making money.
I would agree. And do you have any plugs that you want to share? Are you able to share with us what you're working on right now?
People can have a look at my LinkedIn at the moment. I've got a couple of companies. I think my problem is I have too many ideas. I was actually thinking, if anyone wants to do it, I fancy doing a podcast about ideas. And actually, I feel like I have so many ideas and I feel like they're like songs. And if I don't sing them, then let someone else sing them, even if you don't get no money. And I feel like doing a podcast where I just go, let's do an idea. And everyone dump all their ideas into one pot, and let's all come up, because there's so many out there. And there's loads of entrepreneurial guys who are good at operations and they're good at tactical stuff, but they ain't got that idea. Give them that idea and go do it. A bit like an incubator, but a free one, that does work.
I'm in, Gary. I'm in. Tell me where to sign up.
We definitely have to sit down and go through it, yeah, because I've got loads of ideas. But the one I'm working at the moment is an art project, which I think is going to be amazing, which is I come up with an idea where you put a color code with the alphabet. So instead of creating art, you actually type something and it creates art with color. So everything has a hidden message. So yeah, you can see there. So that top one is actually the color code, the 26 letters. And the one in the middle says Gary Jackson. But you wouldn't know that unless you know what the color code is. So it's like a encrypted messaging sort of way of doing it. I see the kids in the future texting each other in color, but only they understand it like a new language. But there's so many aspects to it, but you can see it on my profile page. And obviously being in consulting at the moment in the mobility world, because obviously we all have to pay the bills as well. I'm available for consulting, which I do honestly believe. I don't think there's many people out there with my experience who stayed through the whole 9 years have got as much experience as me, not just in this industry, but in the scooter industry, the bike industry, the electric vehicle industry, anything with mobility, moving around or problem solving that you need help with, then yeah, just come and link up with me.
Totally. So LinkedIn is a good place to reach out to you, it sounds like. Yeah.
I'm open to messages from anywhere. Yeah.
Very good. And really want to say thanks for coming on the show, Gary. Fascinating hearing your story. What a roller coaster that must have been, man. And to come from a taxi driver's perspective, to come from an entrepreneurial background, but to see the new iPhone come out and to do something with it, the ride that you've been on, whatever you do next, I'm just that much more confident in your success, because we are our experiences, and you've had a heck of a journey.
Oh, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, I'll enjoy talking to you in the future. And thanks for joining me on this episode. And happy Father's Day, hey? Go and enjoy that dinner.
I will do. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.